Okay, so I've had my fill. I'm done. I can't do it anymore. I have to make this video. There is so much bullshit. And I had to get my waders out because the bullshit's that deep. Okay? So, I like to watch other people's channels. I won't name names, won't say anything. But the information that people are putting out there is garbage and they don't know what the hell they're talking about. Okay? So, a lot of people do videos, you know, unequal length versus equal length, top mount versus front mount, you know. Listen to these videos, watch these videos or whatever with a grain of salt, because there's a lot of bad information out there. There's a lot of people who don't know what they're talking about and they'll feed you some garbage, okay? So, a lot of this is going to be on, guessed it, intercoolers, right? Whether it's front mount or top mount OEM. Okay, so I've been hearing a lot of chitty chat about, oh, you can keep, if you stay top mount, you don't need a tune. That is a load of crock, okay? And I'm going to tell you why. Yes, you do keep the same coupler, but I've got the same coupler. That's the same coupler that goes to the fucking top mount. Yeah, no. Yes, you do keep the same coupler and Y pipe, possibly the same Y pipe, depending on what platform you are. Or I guess what turbo you have, into the back of your top mount. So, but the big issue, the reason why you need a tune is because the OEM top mount is a fucking tube and fin. It is not a bar and plate like 99% of the other top mounts out there that you're gonna buy. Okay, it's completely different. A tube and fin is more restrictive. Okay, a bar and plate flows better. A tube and fin, you can get more heat exchange out of it, I guess you could say, without going into crazy detail and stuff, because this is what I do for a living. I do heating and air conditioning, and so when it comes to intercoolers, radiators, anything like that, I know what the hell I'm talking about. I might not know exactly every little bit, but it's in my alley, right? I'm in my lane with this stuff. Oh, excuse me. And when you switch your coil or your intercooler out for a different type of coil, just like an HVAC, shit's got to be redone. It's all got to be recalibrated. You got to have new metering devices and everything else like that, right? On this, obviously, your metering device is your bypass valve. That's your metering device for your intercooler, whether it's front mount or top mount. And that doesn't need to be changed in this situation. But if you change out your top mount for another top mount, a V mount, whatever, you gotta get a tune, flat out. Okay. Okay, so you want to learn about top mount versus front mount after my rant? This is what you need to know. If you stick with a top mount, you're going to get heat soak, but you're going to get a quicker spool time, right? Well, I guess your turbo is going to spool the same amount of time no matter what, but the pressure from your turbo is going to make it to your valves faster because it has less distance to travel, right? It's pretty much just going into this and then into your valve, which then opens and dumps into your motor, right? So boom. Now, the big thing you got to look out for is let's do an example. Well, never mind. The wife took in the pop cans. So, here we go. Let's pretend like this parts box is your top mount intercooler. And this is your pipe that you put your coupler on, and then the coupler couples to the throttle body, right? So if that is dead center, see how there's a lip right here? What'll happen if this coupler part isn't slammed flat like that, oil will build up until it gets to the point where it can go through your coupler, and then it'll chug a bunch of oil, right? There'll be a big gulp of it that slugs your engine, which is not good. And if it doesn't slug your engine, then what will happen is it'll slowly suck oil vapor into your motor while it's just sitting there, you know, little droplets, causing your octane to go down. Okay, so if you want to stay with a top mount intercooler, make sure you find one that your coupler isn't up here, but it's down there when it's mounted up. So that way any oil that builds up in there just goes straight through. You don't get a big gulp of it, okay? Front mount, they call it turbo lag, right? But your turbo's not lagging. It's still making the same amount of PSI. It just has further to travel before it makes it to the same spot. So it just takes longer for it to get up here. So you're higher in your RPM range by the time you feel it hitting, right? Because you got to pressurize that whole system to 18 PSI before you really start feeling the power. So before, you might feel the power at 3,000 RPMs, now you're going to feel it at 4. Okay, so we all know the common differences between top mount and front mount. Everybody says the same thing over and over and over and over again. I'm trying to cut the bullshit out of it and give you guys what you need to know. Okay? I don't care what brand you go with if you do decide to go front mount. Okay? The only deciding factor on front mount versus top mount is if you're going to push your car over, 500 horsepower or more. So let's just make the cutoff 450. If you're at 450 wheel horsepower or less, top mount will work just fine, and you don't need a front mount. The only reason you'd need a front mount when you're 450 wheel horsepower or less is for the cool factor. Just being honest, right? If you do buy a turbo kit, or sorry, not turbo kit, dear God, it's late, sorry, you guys saw the first couple minutes. So, if you do buy a front mount intercooler, you want to specifically look for one that is piped properly. And what I mean by that is you don't want a kit like mine. I like Mishimoto, they're cool people. Their intercooler doesn't have a big pressure drop across it. It flows really nicely. It is a barn plate though, and what you want is a tube and fin. But barn plates are cheap to make, tube and fins are expensive, and they're a little more restrictive on the flow, but with today's technology and everything like that, they're almost the same. And the amount of heat rejection you get from a tube and fin far outweighs the restriction in going through it, okay? So back to the piping correctly. You don't want one like this where it comes off the turbo and then goes around next to your battery, out across your intercooler, and then up over your turbo and into your throttle body. You don't want that. The reason you don't want that is because your turbo sits right there, right? So right after it gets cooled and everything, because this is our cold side and this is our hot side, right after it gets cooled, it's traveling through this pipe and then it's getting heated up again by the damn turbo. So you don't want this setup. You want a setup like ETS, where they come off the turbo, do a U-bend, and come down across the front with the hot side, and then your cold side comes up here and does another U-bend into the intake, because there's nothing hot over here to heat your pipe back up again, okay? That's why you want it to be piped that way. Simple enough, okay? If you are going front mount, you might as well buy one that's going to do the job right. See, these are the things that I didn't know, and now I'm trying to pass this information on to you guys so you don't make the same $1,400 mistake I did. And if I would have known that, I would have got my stuff from ETS. Yeah, so anyways, what else do you need to know? Kids are yelling, I'll be right back. Okay, so again, the next thing you need to understand about your kit is how much horsepower is it rated for, right? Because they expect that on your platform, in order to get X amount of horsepower, you need X amount of boost. You know, 40 PSI or whatever. So if your kit says, like this one for instance, on the Mishimoto, it is good for 700 horsepower. It doesn't say wheel horsepower or anything else like that, it just says 700 horsepower. So I'm going to assume that's 700 crank horsepower. So it's more like 600 wheel horsepower. So my kit is good for up to roughly 600 wheel horsepower. Another thing to look for is the person who makes your front mount intercooler kit. Do they make a rotated kit? So you can just possibly change out and keep the intercooler but buy different piping. Get a different hot side and possibly a different cold side pipe. Or maybe you can just swap it out with a hot side pipe because you went rotated, right? Because you're pushing that 500 plus horsepower at this point where you're supposed to have a front mount. And when you're pushing that kind of horsepower, you need to go rotated for the efficiency and everything else about it. Brad, what's the most efficient intercooler? Is it top mount? Is it front mount? Well, if you're talking about heat extraction or heat rejection or whatever, I'm trying not to go into HVAC terms because it'll trip everybody out because it's actually backwards from what you guys actually think it is. But it would be an air to water intercooler. That will drop your temps the best. That will give you the best results in the end and most consistent results throughout the board, right? Because you can maintain one of your mediums a constant, and then your delta T will be constant, right? Because no matter what, that if you have your medium is, we'll say 50 degrees and you're pulling 90 degree air across your intercooler, then that'll give you a delta T of 20, and no matter what, you'll have 70 degree air always entering your intake manifold. or if your delta T is always 20, right? And your water temperature rises to 70 degrees, then you know that you will be entering with 90-degree temps into your throttle body and intake manifold and everything. So it's super predictable and efficient. And the better the temperature differential is, the better your heat rejection is, the better it works. And if you go with a front mount intercooler, then you don't have to necessarily do something with the hood. But what happens, right, with a hood scoop, you're still sucking in that same air that was designed to go through your scoop and intercooler and kind of roll off the back of the block and head out that way. When you have no more intercooler here, what ends up happening is you cause a low pressure area right behind your front mount and radiator, because it's got all this extra stuff to go through. So you got high pressure, which in turn makes a low pressure, and then you have another high pressure coming in, and it can force hot air back out this way. It can cause an extreme turbulence in your engine bay, which in then turn messes with your intake and pushes hot air towards your intake. So what you want to do is either get an Impreza hood that completely blocks off the hole. You can get block off plates for the front of the scoop that goes the length of the scoop. You can get one of these mesh plates that go right there that allows the air to come in this way and vent out this way, which is like $300. This is like this carbon fiber, I don't know, bonnet piece, I don't know what you want to call it. It's pretty much like an Evo scoop, carbon fiber that fits the STI. So, I mean, for $300 you get a piece of metal mesh, or for another 20, 50 bucks with shipping and everything, you can have carbon fiber that looks sick as hell. I went with the carbon fiber because it looks sick. And you can even get it with the mesh right here for like another 30, 40 bucks or whatever. And then that allows the air to come in here, and that's why this is curved. It helps the air to hit this and come out and go over the windshield. When I am stopped, I can see the heat from the engine bay radiating up through there, which is awesome. And then this also has a bit of a scoop on the front, which helps create a high speed area right here, which in turn turns this into basically makes a vacuum. We'll just put it that way. It makes a vacuum as it comes across, hits this, creates a vacuum, and helps draw that hot air out, which in turn helps draw air through the front because it's wanting to suck it up and out. There's also other ones that where this half vents this way, and there's a scoop over here, and it forces air still across the turbo. You just a little bit of ductwork, you're good to go. And then you can still cool your turbo. So there's a million different ways to skin this cat, you know? So if you have questions, do some research, talk to people. Don't just find somebody who has a pretty car and ask them, you know, because they probably don't know. 9 times out of 10, anybody can put an intake and shit on. I mean, it's bolts, right? And gaskets. If you are smart, you'll buy a torque wrench and swap stuff. Everybody has directions. 99% of this stuff has directions, and you can follow it step by step, especially IAG Performance. You know, I mean, you think I ever did one of these front mount intercoolers on 06 STI? No, because the 07 Perrin put it on, you know? So, I guess that's the end of my rant. Basically, just if you want a front mount, get the front mount. You know, if you want a top mount, go with the top mount. But there are things to look for and to think about other than the stereotypical BS that you catch on everybody else's YouTube page that I'm sick and tired of. And yes, you do need a tune if you're putting a different intercooler on there, because you're changing the flow rate of the intercooler, you're changing how it rejects heat, the flow rate, the mass, the volume that is inside that intercooler is now changing. So you're telling me, you guys are telling me that if I change my fucking intake, I need a tune. But magically, if I change the fucking intercooler, I don't need a tune? Please, please don't fall for this YouTube clout bullshit, because you're going to end up in a shitty situation and you're going to be wondering, how the fuck did this happen? Okay? We all want to be able to put something on without tuning it. I understand that, because each time you got to get a tune, it's $500 or more, and it fucking sucks, right? We just spent $500 on a part. I don't want to spend another $500 fucking get my car retuned. But that's why you buy and wait to put your parts on. Buy multiple parts, have them all lined up, throw them on your car. When you have a dyno tune lined up, then you go and get the tune and you can run all your stuff at one time. It does suck because you don't get the progression and feeling of what an intake did, what a downpipe did, what an up pipe did, what a header did, right? You end up missing out on all of that. Unless you have gobs of money, you don't give a shit. Or you're glutton for punishment. So, if you guys have questions, hit me up. If I don't know, I'll tell you. I don't know, but I can find out. So, this is getting pretty long. Yeah, so anyways, the cheap style intercoolers, which everybody has and which you'll probably end up buying, is a bar and plate, which is great for drag racing because there's so much material in them that they hold on to the temperature that they currently are. Allows you to make a good hard pass on the drag strip before it gets heat soaked and holds on to the heat. The best one to get is a tube and fin. They cost more to make, thus they're going to cost more to buy. There's a few companies out there that do make a good tube and fin, but while you're spending, $1,400-$1,500 for a turbo kit, for a front mount intercooler kit, you'll probably spend $2,000 to $2,500 US on a good tube and fin intercooler. No piping, nothing else, just the intercooler, okay? So that's the reason why most people don't have a tube and fin. And that's why the OEM top mount intercooler is awesome and why it's so great. And you probably shouldn't swap it out. Unless you're just doing it for looks like me, because we all know I'm not pushing over 450 wheel horsepower. So, what else? I don't think there's anything else, but if you guys have questions, ask me. Like I said, just fucking ask somebody. Don't listen to these YouTube guys who are trying to say stuff to get your views and stuff like that, man. It really makes me sick. And I know people in the industry that do Subarus all day, every day. And I mean, if I have 2,000 questions a day coming in, obviously I won't be able to get to everybody and do all that shit. But I've had people that had questions and it wasn't coming across properly in text or email format. So I literally made a video. I made the video. I labeled it the dude's name to make it as easy as possible for him to see that. And he was super thankful, and it was great. Like, took 10-15 minutes of my life. He was very gracious and kind about it. And so I don't have a problem doing stuff like that. Like, if I gotta make you a special video just for you, all right, cool, whatever. And they're like, I grew up as there's no such thing as a dumb question. There are stupid ideas, but no such thing as a dumb question, okay? So if you think that it's a dumb question, it's probably super important, because a lot of people gloss over it thinking that it is a dumb question, but it really isn't. And just because it's not common knowledge, or you're new to the platform or new to the scene or whatever, doesn't mean you shouldn't ask questions, right? I mean, I'm a journeyman. I teach people all the time about HVAC. And the only time I get upset is when people don't ask questions. Because when people don't ask questions, they make mistakes. Mistakes cost money. It costs me less money to teach you right the first time than it does for you to make well, the last guy made like a $60,000 mistake. And when that type of shit happens, people get fired. Building your car, when you make a mistake, you lose a motor. Well, you know, depending on how bad you lose it, depends on how much it's going to cost you. Right? When I lost that short block, way over there, the short block, $1,500. New OEM Subaru short block, Type RA, like in here. But the way I lost it caused me to have to buy new heads. So it's literally a brand new freaking motor, top to bottom. Because I trusted somebody and took their word instead of doing my due diligence. So one more thing I thought about I need to throw into this video. So when you do a front mount intercooler, you are blocking off where your car used to get its airflow for its radiator, right? And we all know how these things are glutton for punishment when it comes to cooling. That's why one of these radiator plates are phenomenal to have. It helps force the air through that's coming through your vent holes and everything else. It helps force it through your radiator. So when you get a front mount, you should get one of these. It doesn't have to be carbon fiber. It can be like a $30 one off at Amazon for all I care. But you need one because you need as much flow through that radiator as possible. Okay? You can also get one of the Killer Bee coolant. Oh my gosh, I forget the name of it. But they're the only ones who make it. It's like a bigger housing that helps the flow of the coolant because it's not going over abrupt 90 anymore. It's more of a radius and it's all nice. Or you can take yours off and you can Dremel it out and make it more like of a curve than it is a 90. You can do that. You don't have to do that, but you can. Next, must have when you get a front mount intercooler, which you should already have regardless if you have a front mount, top mount, or anything else like that, is you need to call Dominic up at Get a Dom Tune and get his cylinder 4 cooling mod that's down here. It's hard to see, but you can see the T-pipe right there, right? that goes down and into the back of the block, which he helped find out that just like the old Chevys did, the reverse cooling. So the way the head's designed and the flow goes through the head and the block and everything, the coolant basically stagnates in the head over here. So when you put the cylinder 4 cooling mod in, it helps the coolant actually flow towards the cylinder number 4 and out into the coolant system. So that's a must-have. It's a reliability thing, kind of like an air oil separator is. But anything you can do to help your coolant system keep cooler temps, you need to do anytime you do a front mount intercooler. Whatever you can do to maintain those colder temps, because they're going to rise on you now that you put this giant freaking heat exchanger in front of it that's dumping heat from your intercooler, right? So you're passing through your intercooler, it's rejecting the heat out of the intercooler, and now you got even warmer air hitting your radiator. So whatever you can do to keep those radiator temps down, you should do once you do a front mount intercooler. You should do it before then, but they're even more so important when you get the front mount. Sissy, what is that pretty little girl doing? Pretty little girl, Sissy. Hey Harley, Daddy loves you. Daddy loves you. And don't ask me how I ended up with such beautiful children, because I am as ugly as an ogre, and only God knows why I have such pretty children.